Beneath the Backcountry by P.J. Taylor. Chapter 8. Morning came the way it often did in the backcountry, slow and reluctant. The mountains didn't wake to the sun like the plains did. Instead, the light crept in as a dull gray glow, muted through shifting curtains of snow cloud. The timberline beyond the ranger station looked blurred, like a sketch someone had erased with the heel of their hand. James Wolfe was already awake when the wind rose. He'd been staring at the ceiling, tracing the cracks in the old boards above his bunk, listening to the sigh and whistle of winter against the walls. His coffee was cold before he remembered to drink it. Today wasn't just another patrol, it was another avalanche hazard day. The forecast had carried warnings since yesterday afternoon, and the snowpack samples they'd taken near Deadman's Run showed instability that made James's gut clench. Wet slides in late spring were one thing. Dry slabs in the heart of winter were something else entirely. They moved like thunder, fast, merciless, swallowing whole canyons. He swung his legs off the bed, tugging on wool socks, listening as the rest of the cabin stirred. Thomas Hale was humming tunelessly to himself as he laced boots. The sound was oddly comforting, steady, like he'd done the same routine every day of his life, which, in truth, he nearly had. Isabel shuffled through her notes at the radio desk, hair pinned up beneath a knit cap, her brow already furrowed. And then there were Evan and Merrick. Evan sat near the stove, face half in shadow, flipping a multi-tool idly in one hand. The metal glinted with every turn. He looked up when James passed, smiled faintly. Too faint. Merrick was beside him, already geared up, parka zipped to the chin, gloves tucked into his belt. He had the kind of presence that filled a room, broad-shouldered and squared off, but it was his eyes that unsettled James. Dull blue but too bright in the dim cabin, and when he smiled, they didn't change. No creases, no warmth, just glass. They hadn't stopped talking about old times since Merrick arrived yesterday. Shared assignments in Utah, patrols in Montana, long hunts through thick forest. Evan laughed more now, but it sounded rehearsed, practiced, as if they were running through a script rather than remembering something real. James tried to shake it off. They were rangers. Transfers happened. Old friends crossed paths. Nothing strange about that, but still a small knot stayed in his stomach. By 7, they were skinning up toward a slope near Granite Hollow, with snow probes strapped to their packs. Avalanche hazard work was tedious but necessary, and it grounded James. Digging pits, checking layers, measuring cohesion and crystal types. It was the kind of thing that left little room for paranoia. Thomas drove his shovel into the drift with a grunt. "See this?" he said, brushing loose powder off a firm, icy layer beneath. Weak ore under a slab. Classic setup. One loud noise, one heavy step, and the whole hillside's gonna peel like wet paint. James crouched beside him, running fingers over the brittle grains. They sifted like glass dust against his glove. "Yeah," James said. "She's loaded all right. Call it high hazard." They logged their readings, snapped photos, radioed Isabel with updates. The wind carried ice into their hoods, biting their ears. James could feel the mountain breathing beneath them, silent pressure waiting for the wrong trigger. Evan and Merrick worked a second pit farther upslope. Their figures looked small, crouched silhouettes against the white, but James found his eyes drifting toward them more than the snowpack. They moved quickly, efficiently, like they already knew what they'd find. Merrick drove his shovel in hard, pulled samples with smooth precision. Evan recorded without hesitation, his pencil scratching fast and steady. They didn't talk, not like Thomas did, explaining every step. They worked like men rehearsing a drill. When they regrouped, Merrick spoke first. "Same up top," he said flatly. "Weak layer, heavy slab. No surprise." Evan just nodded beside him, lips tight. Thomas whistled low. "Whole basin's a death trap. Anyone crosses that ridgeline today, they're done." Isabel's voice crackled over the radio clipped to James's chest. "Copy your hazard calls. I've logged it. Also possible SAR situations. 2 snowshoers overdue from the Timber Creek trailhead. Reporting party says they left yesterday noon and should have returned by nightfall. Vehicles still in the lot." James exchanged a look with Thomas. Avalanche work was supposed to fill the day, but a missing party call always took precedence. They regrouped at the cabin, traded avalanche gear for SAR packs, first aid, bivy sacks, signal flares. Isabel spread the topo map across the table, tracing possible routes the snowshoers might have taken. They could have headed for the ridge overlook here, she said, finger landing on a contour line. Popular spot, but if they got turned around in low visibility, or wandered into Granite Hollow, Thomas muttered, which we just called unstable. The team split. Thomas, James, and Isabel would start toward the ridge. Evan and Merrick volunteered for Granite Hollow. James almost objected. He wanted eyes on them, wanted to know what they were really up to, but the division made sense, and he bit back the words. The trek up Timber Creek was slow, snow waist-deep in drifts, trees groaning under fresh weight. James felt the silence heavy around them. Search and rescue was always like this. Your breath loud in your ears, your eyes scanning endlessly for tracks, colors, movement. An hour in, Isabel raised a gloved hand. Tracks here! Snowshoe imprints veered off the trail, weaving toward a dense stand of spruce. James knelt, brushing at the prints. Crisp edges, but partially drifted, maybe 12 hours old. They followed. The trees closed in. The light dimmed. Wind carried fine powder down in faint curtains. After another quarter mile, they found the first clue. A dropped glove, frozen stiff, half buried in snow. Looks like they panicked, James said softly. Minutes later, a voice cut the silence. Weak, hoarse. Hey, over here! They found the pair of two men in their 40s huddled beneath a ledge, snowshoes abandoned. One had twisted his ankle, the other looked hypothermic, face pale, lips bluish. The rescue turned into triage. James checked vitals, wrapped a foil blanket around the shivering man. Thomas improvised a splint. Isabel got a fire going despite the wind, coaxing flame from damp tinder like she'd done it 100 times. It took the better part of the day to stabilize them, haul them by sled back to the trailhead where a snowmobile could reach. By the time they returned to the cabin, dusk had fallen. Evan and Merrick weren't back yet. Their packs were gone, radios silent. Isabel logged their absence, brows knitting tight. Should have checked in by now, she said, even if they're still scouting. James said nothing. He pulled off his gloves, flexing stiff fingers, staring at the empty bunks across the room. His gut told him this wasn't about scouting. It was hours later, well past dark, when the two finally returned. Snow crusted their boots, but their jackets looked almost untouched, like they'd been in shelter most of the time. Their cheeks were flushed, eyes too bright. Lost radio contact in the hollow, Merrick explained smoothly. Interference from the ridges. Nothing unusual. Evan added, no sign of the missing party. Must have been on your side. His tone was calm even, too calm. James glanced at Thomas. He caught the older ranger watching too, jaw tight. They didn't speak, but in that silence, James knew. Thomas had noticed the same things. That night, James lay awake again. The wind rattled the eaves. Evan and Merrick's low voices murmured from across the cabin, just audible, but too soft to catch words. Like a language James wasn't meant to understand. The knot in his gut twisted tighter. This is the end of Chapter 8. Like and subscribe for the next chapter. Thank you for listening.